Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now Brawlers, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to be taking a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Summoners. It's a fantasy-themed, card-driven, tactical miniatures game. And before we go any further, I'm going to have a link down at the bottom of your screen and then down in the description ahead of the comments section, which will have a link to the Kickstarter project page. If you like what you see during this video, I would encourage you to go to the Kickstarter project page, find out even more information, and then consider backing the project. Now, Summoners is all about each player taking control of a different powerful sorcerer, the summoner in question, and summoning creatures called pets in the game that will attack your rival's pets and try to destroy them and knock their opponent down to 0 hit points. It combines different aspects of games that have been out and very popular over the last 20 years, but puts them together in a new and unique way. So let's go ahead and take a brief look at how the game is played with just 2 of the factions in the game. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Summoners from Twiz Entertainment. Now, the first thing I want to say right off the bat is that this game is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. So if you like what you see during this preview and during my intro and outro, I would encourage you to go to the Kickstarter page. I'm going to have a link at the bottom of your screen and then down in the description of the video. Also, this is a prototype version of the game. Some of the artwork is preliminary. The miniatures are just 3D printed miniatures, so there will be better quality finished miniatures in the final product. This is just a prototype to show you a little bit about the game, to give you a taste for it, and hopefully encourage you to check out more information about the project. Now, Summoners is a tactical head-to-head game. You can actually play it with 2 players or 4 players. If you play with 4 players, it's 2 teams of 2. Thematically, you are a powerful sorcerer, a summoner, who is using your magic ability to bring out units onto the battlefield and then use those to attack your opponent's units and get through their defenses, get to the summoner himself or herself, and then knock it down to 0 health. If you can be the first person to do that, you will win the game, or you and your teammate will win the game. How you accomplish this is through cards. You have magical spells and cards that you use to both summon your units, also to cast spells directly on either your units, your opponent's units, or your opponent directly. So it's a card-driven game together with a miniature skirmish game. Now, in this prototype overview, we have 2 factions that we're going to be playing with. We have the Elementalist, and here I'll just show you their card really briefly before going over all the different things that's on it. That's the Elementalist Summoner. And then you have the Necromancer Summoner, who's obviously going to be bringing out undead units. Now, just as a little breakdown of what's on each of these cards, first you have your life track down here in the bottom, which you'll have a token to keep track of. You start with 20 life, and remember your goal is to knock your opponent's life down to 0. Then you have special abilities, and every summoner has their own passive special ability. The Elementalist final ability will actually be different than the one that's printed here, but you're going to be using this track to keep track of your ability points. You'll start off at 0. Actually, the Elementalist's new passive ability will let her start off at 1. And the Necromancer actually has a passive ability once per game to bring a skeletal warrior back to the field. But then you also have abilities that are going to require you to spend those ability points. So for instance, the Elementalist Inferno ability lets her spend 5 ability points to deal 2 damage to all of the opponent's pets. One important thing I'll mention here is that the abilities, much like the spell cards that you use in the game, are either direct or instant, among other things. So instant abilities can be played at any time, but direct can only be on your turn. So you can actually do an instant as a response to something your opponent has done. The easiest way to tell you a little bit about Summoners is to take you through what a typical turn is going to be like. First off, you'll put your tokens onto your summoner, depending on where they're supposed to start at the beginning of the game. Then you're going to draw 4 cards from the deck. Now, on a typical turn, you're also going to be able to draw another card from your deck and reset any mana gems that you have and take another one off the top and flip it over. Now, mana gems are the main way in which you're going to be producing the mana you need in order to fuel your spells, to summon creatures, and so on. So this is an example of a 2 mana gem card, but there's also 1 mana gem cards as well. So you'll flip one of those over. If you have one that you had previously exhausted, you'll reset those as well, and that will give you your mana for the turn. You'll also gain another ability point as well to fuel your special abilities on your summoner card directly. At that point, it's all about playing the cards that you have in hand in order to defeat your opponent. All right, so next I'm just going to show you some of the cards that are in the spell decks. We'll start with the Elementalist. These are cards that are going to be used both to direct and instant spells, but also summoning spells as well. So here we have the Arcane Elemental, which costs 6 mana to bring into play. Here you have its health and its attack power. And then the attack grid, along with this first line of text down here, tells you how the Arcane Elemental can actually attack. In this case, it can deal damage to a creature in front of or behind it. Facing in this game is that you're always facing away from where you're seated, at least your creatures will be. It also, every creature or pet has a special ability. So the Arcane Elemental has a Guardian ability, which means it can't be the target of opponent's spells or attachments. The Water Elemental is much easier to bring out. It's weaker, but it's more versatile. It's faster. It has more spaces that it can attack. Oh, also, I'm sorry, I forgot. Here is their movement ability as well. So you see that the Water Elemental also has more to move, which is 4 spaces, whereas the Arcane Elemental only has 3 spaces that it can move. The Water Elemental's abilities can also lets it get health whenever more elementals are brought into play, which can be very useful. Here's some of the Elementalist's other spells. Direct spells. Remember, direct spells can only be cast on your turn. The Elemental Gauntlets, target pet gains 2 attack until the end of turn. So you target one of your own pets with this. Then you have Arcane Missile, which is an instant spell, which means you can do it out of turn, not just on your turn. This one lets you deal 3 damage to opponent's summoner or to target pets divided however you choose. So either directly to your opponent's summoner or to a multitude of different pets or just one. Then you have Magic Barrier. Now this is an attachment spell, which means you get to put it onto one of your pets. You would want to put this one on your pets at least. The Magic Barrier absorbs the damage done to the attached pet each round. So just 1 damage, but each round and it stays out there. Now let's get to the Necromancer Summoners pet cards and spell cards. You have the Commander of Bones, who has 5 health and 3 attack. He costs 3 to bring out. His attack pattern is every orthogonal space around him. His special ability is haste. That means that he gets to move and act and attack on his first turn and use a special ability. Normally, which that is a special ability actually, normally pets when they're summoned cannot do anything for their first turn. Then you have the Skeletal Knight, who also has the same type of attack pattern and is a little bit cheaper to bring out. And he has a taunt ability, which means that pets must attack him before all others. Then you have the Touch of Death direct spell. Deal 2 damage to target pet or your opponent's summoner for only 2 mana. The Recall Bones instant spell. You can sacrifice one of your pets to deal damage to your opponent's summoner equal to the sacrificed pet's attack. So if he's not doing any good for you, nuke him and have him deal damage to your opponent instead for 4 mana. And Flesh Armor attachment, which is really creepy. You get to add 1 to your target pet's health and attack. And now I might as well go ahead and show you some of these miniatures. Now remember that these are only prototype 3D printed miniatures. The final ones are going to look different. So here I'll show you one of the Commanders of Bones. There's that. I showed you one of those cards. And then from the other side, we have, I think this is one of the Earth Elementals. For the Elementalist, you have the Water Elemental, the card that I had shown you. There's just some of the miniatures. And whenever you summon the miniatures onto the battlefield, they have to go into the row that is closest to you. So they have to be summoned into this spot. And in fact, if your opponent manages to take control by putting their pets into your spots, you're not able to summon. So it's very important that you manage to keep control of your spots. Once they're out on the battlefield, unless you have a special ability that says otherwise, like I said, they cannot be activated on their first turn, but then in subsequent turns in any order while it's your turn, you can choose to move them spaces depending on their movement rate in any direction actually. And then if they're within an attack vector of your opponent's units, or if they're in the farthest spot on the board away from you, and in other words, in your opponent's summoner row, then you can attack the summoner directly, and that's ultimately what you want to do. And that is just a very brief taste for what the game is like. You're using hand management and card-driven abilities in order to bring units out onto the field and cast direct spells, and use your own special abilities in order to take down your opponent's summoner and win the game. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Now, as I briefly touched on in my intro, there have been a lot of games in the last 20 years that have featured thematically 2 wizards fighting one another, or has had combat driven by cards, or features miniatures on a skirmish battlefield. There's a lot of games that fit into one of those categories, and there's been a few successful ones that fit into a couple of those different categories, but very few games have managed to do all three. And I think that the final production version of Summoners is going to fit nicely with all three of those different aspects. Your powerful sorcerers, summoners fighting each other, but also you're doing this with spell cards that you sling back and forth, also representing your mana, and also you're doing this to manipulate your units on the battlefield, your pets, and to attack your opponent's pets. All three of these things integrate together into a very fast game. That's an important key point, because while there's a lot of miniatures games that feature that's head-to-head and you're trying to manipulate your units and attack your opponent's units, those games tend to be big, grandiose, take a lot of time and effort with tons of little rules, clarifications going back and forth, just really dragging the game out. I should know, I've played a lot of games like that. But with Summoners, it's very fast. But that doesn't mean that because it's fast that it's not tactical and strategic. Quite the opposite. Again, it's merging these different aspects together. So you have the aspect where you're, the hand management, where you're trying to use the spells that you have to either summon or to halt the progress of your opponent's units, but then you're also deciding whether to spend your mana cards, and it has a very interesting mana system as well that I haven't seen in maybe any other game, not done quite like this, that you use to fuel those spells, and it's deciding that resource management aspect with the hand management aspect. Do I save my mana? Do I use it? I mean, figuring out that balance is really the key to the game. So there is strategy to be had here, and to be able to knock out several matches so quickly, even if you play the team game with 4 players, that really helps move things along and makes it into a very interesting game. Also, the fact that it's so customizable. So you have the different factions, and like I said, I only looked at 2 of the factions, that which I think there's going to be like at least double of that in the final game. But also, you have all the different spell cards that each faction has. So inevitably, you know, if the project successfully funds and if you start seeing more content for the game, you're going to see a lot more factions, which can bring more variety to the game. And even for the existing factions, you'll see more spell cards. Just a lot of different content could potentially be added to the game. So you have that feel of it being very customizable and expandable, like so many successful collectible card games or miniatures games of the past. You have that aspect too. So there's a lot here that I would recommend that people who are into games like Magic the Gathering, Summoner Wars, miniatures games like War Machine or Malifaux that take place on a smaller scale, people that like those types of games should at least take a look at Summoners, because I think that it's going to have a good appeal to those types of people, because it plays fast, it's tactical, it's strategic, and you get that fantasy theme of being a powerful magic user and summoning these really powerful entities to fight for you. And if you're one of those people and you think that this is going to appeal to you, I would encourage you to go to the Kickstarter page. I'm going to have a link at the bottom of your screen, and then down in the description section, just below this video and above the comment section, that's going to take you to the Kickstarter project page. You'll find out a lot more information about Summoners and hopefully consider backing the project. That is Summoners. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.